this genie out of the bottle is going to destroy us.
So you don't fear a hyper-scientific world as long as it comes within the context of...
I fear, like every person, I almost want to rope in every thoughtful person. I fear our information outrunning our wisdom. Yeah.
So we're going to get to everything that we're going to talk about on the podcast this week. But first, I'm going to give you my driving tip of the week. Kind of start including these a little bit because you people drive me crazy out here. So we're going to help you out a little bit. We're going to talk about merging today. As you see from my dash cam here, we're getting ready to go across an intersection of two of the biggest highways really in the country. I'm on I-287 going north in New Jersey. I'm getting ready to cross I-80, obviously going east and west in New York City in the Delaware Water Gap. Now let's kind of observe how everybody's going to merge in and merge off here. So I'm going to end up, after this cuts off, I'm going to end up being in the far right lane, and then the traffic from I-80 is going to merge with me. Now, when you're merging onto an interstate, it is your job to merge. It is not my job to get out of your way. Like if there was a car, I see a car coming over here now. Here he comes. He's expecting me to do what? See, he should either speed up or slow down. Okay, so there he goes. He's going to speed up. He did exactly right. He's taking responsibility for his merge. I'm not going to help anybody merge on this. Let's see what else happens here. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. If he would have sat there expecting me to get over, even though I could have gotten over. One of the most dangerous things, especially as a trucker, I can do is make a lane change. I don't want to have to make an unnecessary lane change. And especially if I'm not absolutely sure the traffic's clear on my left, I'm not going to move over for you. So you've either got to, that's what this acceleration lane is for you guys that are cars. Now trucks are different. If I see a truck coming, now I've got to work together with him, get him on the highway. It's a different story then. But you four-wheelers, you people driving cars, it's your responsibility to merge. And so you do exactly what that guy did. He was right next to me, came right up next to me, and he could have dropped back or sped up, and he chose to speed up, and that's exactly what you need to do. It's your responsibility to merge, and that's exactly how it happened right there. So keep that in mind. If you see a trucker and he's in the lane and you want to merge into it, don't expect him to move over. If he does, if he can, great. If not, that's fine too. Just keep in mind, he's got reasons why he's not moving over. Again, it may just be that he doesn't want to make an unnecessary lane change. Again, lane changes are the most dangerous things you can do on the highway, period, for truckers and cars alike. So you people weaving in and out of traffic, you guys are idiots. You're going to have an accident doing that sooner or later. It's just a matter of time. So anyway, there's your driving tip of the day. Please do everybody a favor and learn how to merge. It's frustrating for everybody if you're expecting some other guy to do something to help you merge. You've got to learn how to get on the highway yourself. Okay, so again, on to the podcast thing now that we've got the driving tip of the week out of the way. I'm trying to give those to you guys a little bit. That way you know how to drive when you get out here on the road with me, okay? There was one interview that Ben Shapiro did with Bishop Robert Barron that I was going to cover that exclusively, but I changed my mind because I listened to him, Bishop Robert Barron, on an interview with Dave Rubin, also with a rabbi by the name of Wolope, I believe it is, and we're going to cover that in juxtaposition to an interview Joe Rogan did with Gad Saad on the exact same stuff we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, which is morality, philosophy, how we know things, epistemology. We talked about that, and we're going to see how a secularist like Gad Saad, pronounces straight out that really reason, scientific method, that's the only game in town. That's the only way that we can know things, and that is not true. We can know things through philosophy. I would challenge him on that straight away. I would say, Dr. Saad, can't we know things through philosophy as well? Isn't that a way of knowing? Aren't there things that teach us certain things about how the world is and how things are in truth through things like philosophy or art or music or something like that? And the thing of it is, it seems like that where a lot of these Enlightenment guys want to go is they want to definitely exclude theology from the whole mix. And I think that's for all the reasons I've articulated over the past several podcasts, that's a really unwise move to make, because you're eliminating well, I mean, I believe in God. I am a theist. I am a Christian theist. So I believe in a specific God. And to exclude the knowledge that God Almighty imparts would be really stupid. I mean, some of these guys, I want to put to myself, okay, hold on, wait a second, Dr. Sad. What I want to ask you is, if, let's say for the sake of argument, there is a God, would it be wise for, and you knew you had words from him, would it be wise to exclude those instructions, those whatever words that God gave to you? And if anybody with any sense should say, yeah, that would be a really dumb thing to do if you knew you had a word from God, to exclude that from your base of knowledge. Okay, so that's really what it boils down to for me as a theist. And so to explain to somebody, or to get in your own mind why it is we listen to God's voice, again, it's the whole, I don't buy this, this middle ground of agnosticism. Whether there's a God or not, you need to get that figured out. That's very, very important, because you can't leave that one up in the air, because if there happens to be a God, you better find out what he wants. You better find out what he requires. You better find out if he said anything. Has he spoken in any way? And it kind of proceeds from this logic. Again, if I could prove atheism, if I could prove there was not a God, or if I was convinced, as many of the new atheists are, that the likelihood is there's not a God, then I guess I could somehow proceed from that. But as I've said many times on the show before, atheism just turns into another form of fundamentalist religion. If you're going to replace God with something, whatever it is that you worship, and I think that bears out very much on the ground. There was a debate recently between Brett Weinstein and Richard Dawkins, where essentially Weinstein was challenging Dawkins that this new atheism turns into a religion, and I think that necessarily has to be true for any form of atheism, quite honestly, because then if you don't do the new atheism thing, then you end up doing the Enlightenment modernist thing, which, as we pointed out many times, has its own problems. Okay, so if you proceed, and then the agnostic thing is untenable, and then if you proceed, if you say, okay, there's a God, if you get to that point, which again I think is a roundabout, a very circuitous way to understanding things, to getting to a proper worldview. Really, I like, again, I would argue the resurrection, because I get straight away to Christian theism, which is where you really need to be if you really want to understand everything, because not only do you need to get to a point where you believe there is a God, but you need to know who that God is and if he said anything. And we need God's voice, right? We need this objectively. So that's kind of what that's what I kind of juxtapose with Dr. Sad and Bishop Barron and Rabbi Wolope, where they talk about how there's different ways of knowing things, and theology should be one of them. We should take into account, if there is a God, what he said. That seems to be just something that's obviously self-evident, if I'm not being too redundant there. So I want to juxtapose those couple of things, and then we're going to move into the interview with Ben Shapiro. And this is a thing that always gets dodged, or seems to get dodged, and I'm not sure if Shapiro, I'm sure that Shapiro's got a bit of agenda. Now, that's not a knock on Shapiro. We all have our agendas, okay? That's patently obvious, that everyone has an agenda, everyone has a worldview. The trick is to be aware of what that is and to proceed from there. And I think Shapiro most of the time does a very good job of that. But I think he's got this presupposition that really, at the end of the day, on the ground, Christianity and Judaism are the same things, and how you get to heaven is the same way. And so what difference does it make whether or not you're a Jew or a Christian? And that interview really gives me a chance to point out what kind of difference it really does make. between a Christian worldview, between believing that Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah, that he lived, he died, and rose again for the forgiveness of sins, and how that is differentiated between Judaism and really even Catholicism, quite honestly. And why that's important on the ground. Because here's the deal. And Shapiro kind of has it in a crass way. He kind of says, well, the big difference between Judaism and Christianity is that Christianity is grace-based and Judaism is works-based. Okay, that's fair enough. So I would say that I do good works because I've been given God's grace. And I kind of boil it down this way. I say, look, I would ask Shapiro, I would say, Ben, so you're saying that that Judaism is a do your best and God will do the rest type of religion. And I think he will probably say, yes, that's pretty much right, because we try our very best to obey the 613 commands. And if we falter in those, then on Yom Kippur, or when we ask for forgiveness of sins, then we ask for the forgiveness of sins where we faltered in those commands. Okay, so do your best and God will do the rest type of religion. And then Christianity would say that God has done it all, that Jesus, it is finished, as Christ said on the cross, that Jesus has fulfilled the law on our behalf. That's what Christians call justification. And this is the one thing I was very disappointed with Dr. MacArthur, that he didn't make that differentiation. He didn't differentiate between law and gospel, and he knows that differentiation. I've seen him use it before. And Calvinists have this. They know there's a difference between justification and sanctification. And he should have got into, that's the only way to really make those distinctions, because otherwise the whole thing gets muddled up, and you end up with a fundamental confusion of law and gospel doing that. And so that's really what I think is at the core of this, is a confusion of law and gospel, a confusion of sanctification and justification. Because when you have a do your best and God will do the rest type of religion, what you end up with is with a contest between you and the rest of humanity to see who does the best. And that's just simply, that's basically what Shapiro comes out and says. And I kind of point that out in the podcast, that you compare yourself to how other people are doing. I mean, he kind of points this out when he says, well, you Christians might obey the 10 commandments, but we Jews, we obey 613 commands. So deal with that. We're gonna get in way ahead of you guys. So, but the problem with that is, and it's kind of funny, but the problem with that is when you ask Shapiro the question, and this is where I think his presupposition, if he has this presupposition, that Jews and Christians, the Jewish religion and the Christian religion, at the end of the day are essentially the same. They all end up in the same place, and they all basically look and act the same. And the problem with it is that when you look at things like that, and you have all law, if he was an all law situation where it was like, yeah, you've got to obey the commands or you're not getting in type of idea, then you're kind of backed into a corner. But that's not where Shapiro goes. He would say, no, look, we Jews, just like you Christians, ask for forgiveness of sins. And so then I would ask him, okay, so why not just, kind of do a halfway job of obeying the commands? Why be so strict about it? Why try so hard? And then just on Yom Kippur ask for forgiveness. What's wrong with that? And then, you might say, well, you have to try. And then I would ask him, well, how much? How hard do you have to try before you know that you can go ahead and in good faith ask for forgiveness? When if you make a deliberate mistake? I mean, people do this all the time, and that's the thing is, and that's the other difference I might point out to Shapiro is, look, you're this paragon of moral virtue, but not everybody's like you. Not everybody has the discipline to do that. They need more. People will shipwreck their own lives all the time. I've done that. I've done very stupid things in my life, committed grave sins on purpose, that I've had to come back and beg God's forgiveness for. So are there things that just are unforgivable? Or see how the whole thing gets muddled? And then on top of that, you add this layer. If Ben Shapiro believes in an afterlife, and I think he does, and he would say that you have to earn that afterlife by in some measure by your own good works. Then where does genuine love come into the picture? Because if all you're doing is good works for others so you can achieve heaven, then those aren't really good works. And that's the thing, that's the key. See, and the Lutheran confessions point this out, that non-Christians can do good works, quote unquote, that appear to be good works on the outside, but on the inside they're not, because ultimately they're for selfish reasons. You ultimately turned into a Randian, an Ayn Rand devotee, because everything ends up being this selfish act. Ultimately, everything that may look like it's altruism ends up being selfishness. Even the love and care for your neighbors ends up being selfishness, because at the end of the day, the only reason you're doing it is so you can achieve heaven. So there's many problems with that position. And the good thing that Bishop Barron points out in that interview is that, because I get to talking about revelation and why is it not enough to just take natural law and form our morality from that? Why isn't that enough? And Bishop Barron makes a really wise move there. So, okay, let's not talk about morality so much in this situation, because again, we pointed out that if we don't have revelation as far as morality goes, it takes a long time to get to the idea. I mean, just take the fundamental idea of Western civilization, that we are endowed with these unalienable rights, that each individual has the right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, right? This comes directly from Genesis. This is not an Enlightenment idea, but Enlightenment people like to take claim for that. They like to say, oh, we came up with the whole notion of the individual being superior, and that's not true. God spoke this many millennia ago, just like the idea of all the commands. We're finding out, hey, it's not such a healthy thing to be to engage in dangerous sexual practices. It's not such a good idea to divorce your wife. It's not such a good idea to have single family homes. These sorts of things. These things take a long time if man, using only his reason, looking at natural law, has to come up with it. It'll take a really long time. So there's all those problems with it. And that's the reason why we need revelation. But Bishop Barron brings another layer to it, which says not only do we need revelation for that, we also need revelation to show that God is merciful. Because all natural law is law. It's all law. There's no grace in nature. Go out into the forest and try to survive just with the clothes on your back. You're gonna die. There's no mercy out there. And so that's where I might challenge like a Sam Harris or any other atheist and say, well, look, okay, so in your value system, is there any room for mercy and forgiveness? And where do you find that value in science or nature? See, that's what I guarantee you, Dr. Sad would say, yeah, absolutely. I think we should value mercy and forgiveness, and reconciliation and compassion and these sorts of things. And then I would say to him, show me with the scientific method or by reason why we should be compassionate, why we should forgive our enemies, why we should love our enemies. There's no way other than in Revelation. And especially if you're even a deist, and especially if you're a theist like me, you've got to know that God is gracious and merciful, and that is his fundamental characteristic. One of his fundamental characteristics, or the fundamental characteristics, is that he is love. God is love. That's what St. John teaches us, right? We would not know that just by observing nature. And that's a really good point that Bishop Barron gives us in this interview. So anyway, so I go through all that in a lot more detail on the podcast, and hopefully it'll all kind of line itself out, and you'll really get the idea of, why an atheist worldview doesn't work, why a postmodern worldview doesn't work, why an agnostic worldview doesn't work. You are faced with the hard, I hate to use this term because it's kind of a technical, but you're faced with the brute fact of dealing with God. What are you going to do with God? Who is he? Did he say anything? Who is this God? It's kind of like my wife likes the new Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. These other books. One of the lines in there is, is, who is this God fellow anyway? You know, one big mistake that God made, man. Another big mistake God made, woman. And who is this God person anyway, right? You need to know that. You're faced with that fact. You have to deal with that fact and thoroughly think through it, and then make sense of the world from your conclusions. And the only way I can make heads or tails of any of it is through the Christian worldview, where we have God's voice. We're certain of it. We know who He is. He's specific, and we can have that as our initial salvo, our first step. And then after that, then reason and emotion all working together in concert make sense of the world. It's a beautiful thing. Otherwise, what you end up having, and especially if you go the modern or postmodern route and you end up elevating reason or emotion above God's voice, above Scripture, then what ends up happening is you end up doing unreasonable things. You actually end up doing things that are not reasoned, like killing babies before they're born and using their body parts for medical research. That's the kind of reason, quote unquote, you end up with, and that's not reason at all. That is completely barbaric and unreasonable. And we know that, and we're checked in that sort of reason by Holy Scripture, by God. See, so reason even becomes clouded and mysterious and muddled, and then the postmoderns come in and say, well, whose reason gets to rule, right? That's just your reason. Like Shapiro likes to say, facts don't care about your feelings, but postmodern comes around and says, my feelings don't care about your facts. My emotions don't care about your reason. And who are you to tell me that reason should rule the day? And then when emotion takes over, that clouds everything else, and it just turns into a complete mess. All right, so we're going to try to close the loop on this whole worldview thing on the ground this week. I think we've got some really good examples of it. And again, go there and I lay it right out all for you. Again, don't forget how to merge. We talked about that at the beginning. That's very important. Also, don't forget to listen to us on KNNA The Cross. And please go to Layman's Terms Radio and give to the Kenuel Project. Thank you to all of you who have been giving lately. We've got a good amount of donations coming in, and I hope that continues. I would also ask some of you, again, I think the 80-20 thing is going to apply here. We're going to have 20% of our listeners give 80% of the money to this, unfortunately. So if you've given already and you really have a heart for this, and you really want to see this go forth, and you have the means, obviously, go subscribe for like $10 a month. You give $10 a month until we raise the money, and then it's done. That might be a way to go for some of you who want to give some more. Anyway, thanks for checking out the podcast and the video this week. We'll see you next week.